South Carolina has a history soaked in revolution, civil war, and centuries of untold stories, and some of those stories refuse to stay buried. Tonight, my guest has spent years digging into the haunted corners of the Palmetto State, and he's putting it all in print. I'm Jeremy, the Common Historian, where history meets the supernatural. Welcome to the Common Historian. John, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. It's funny that you're the common historian and they call me the haint historian. But no, it's so good to be here, Jeremy. I really appreciate that we were able to come together and do this podcast because before we know it, fall's going to be here. And that's really the busy time of the year. And I don't know how it is where you are, but it's about 110 degrees. The heat is on cremate here. So I think that's probably why we have so many churches here. You go outside, you feel the heat, and you're like, "Hey, I better go repent."
Yeah, we were very warm until the cold front came through last night, and today we haven't crawled past. We're at 56 right now, so
Ah,
it's a bit on the chillier side, but I think it's supposed to warm back up by the end of the week.
yeah, it's 95 here, so I'll
Oh,
trade you.
so can you kind of take us back to the beginning? What kind of pulled you towards the haunted history of South Carolina?
Yeah, so I went to the University of South Carolina, Columbia. I went to Winthrop University, and my major was actually political science with a minor in history. And when I was a child, the home I lived in, it was haunted by a man in a black brim hat. I never saw the ghost. Other family members did. It was ironically my bedroom, and I know the people listening or watching this, I can give you the general overlay of the house. When you walked in, you had the kitchen. Off to the left, you had a side room and another bedroom. And then when you walked through the kitchen, it was like a long hallway that L shaped up 90 degrees back. And so I had a small room, Jeremy, that's over to the side. And I could always feel something in that room, especially sleeping. You just had this odd feeling like something was watching you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later that my mother told me that the home was indeed haunted. She believes it was a person where she worked with the lady who they bought the home from. And the gentleman, her husband passed away. And she always told my mother, "Oh, he loved this home. He loved this home." Years after that, my father built on two rooms onto the house. So my parents actually had one of the brand new built rooms for their bedroom. And she said at night she could see the guy staring and looking at her through the hallway. And the room that was my room is the one that she went and lay down in one day and she felt something slap her.
Oh,
Yeah. And so there was some other odd things that kind of occurred in the home. It was just something ever since an early age I was interested in the paranormal, even so much so going to high school. Back then, in the mid 1990s, you didn't really have a whole lot. You didn't, the internet was coming of age. I want to say internet 94, 95. Homes didn't have it back then. So there was really nothing for teenagers to do on the weekend. So me and a couple of friends would go on these trips on Friday or Saturday night. We look forward to it. We all load up in the car. We would go and hoping that we would get a scare. So one of my first ghost stories was the Hounded Goshen down in South Carolina. He's my favorite ghost story. And it just, I'm not going to say it's probably something I should have started writing about years ago. But the older I got, it just started clicking with me. It just says, "Hey, John, you really need to start going into this." And it was really to preserve the folklore of the Carolinas. So I just don't write about South Carolina. I write about North. I write
okay.
about Georgia, Tennessee. If you go to the Lantern, you'll see me write other places. I've written about New York before, Pennsylvania, even though I advertise that, hey, it's really the Southeast, I do go outside of those parameters.
Now, was there a specific moment, location, or story that made you think I need to write about this?
I wanted to be a historian. And back then, I had a lot of friends that were going to college for political science. They're like, "Hey, you really want to be an attorney?" And I was like, "Yeah," because back then I thought attorneys had a lot of money, especially in my small town where I'm from. If you had an attorney, normally they lived in the big homes and all that stuff. And so that's why I majored in political science with a minor in history. I'm not going to say I had a defining moment to make me say, "Oh, th- this is going to be my life's work." I tell people, and I think you and I had a conversation the other night, Jeremy, when we were talking on the phone.
Yeah.
I don't believe people realize how closely tied paranormal and history is to one another. I always say you can't have one without the other. You can't have history without paranormal and vice versa. My main area of focus is, and I'm starting my master's degree in the fall for history. My main focus is 1860, right before the start of the Civil War, all the way through the Great Depression. That's my area of focus. And a lot of that probably is because I'm from the South. The Civil War, Northeast, South, the Civil War, there's a lot of history. And there's a lot of places around the South you can go today. If you know what to look for, you can still see remnants of the Civil War.
Yeah.
So that was a situation. I remember sitting through some history classes, and I had a gentleman that he was a professor. His name was, we called him Dr. Stan, fantastic guy. I took him in, took his Southern History 441 class. And at that time, he had written, I'm going to say numerous books. I don't know exactly how many at that time he had. And that really got me into the wanting to tell the stories to preserve it, because I want to say he was from New Orleans, is where Dr. Stan was from. Years later, lo and behold, here I am. Got the first book coming out, Haunted South Carolina. That's going to be out August 18th. So I'm really excited about it.
That's great. Yes. So I was also wondering, how did the Lantern Media come into fruition? Did you join that, or did you found it, or?
Yeah, so on February 18th, 2020, I was living in North Carolina, right outside of Greensboro, and I was missing home terribly. I was ready to get back, and I sat down one day, flipped my computer open. It wasn't initially called the Lantern, and we had a couple different people involved in it. So the Lantern didn't start out the way that you see it today with the history and things of that nature. The ghost stories has always been a part of what we do on the Lantern, but we really wrote a lot in the early days about local politics. And it was really just trying to find an identity and define where we fit with the local landscape of social media, especially in 2020, even more so in 2026. And we did a political game for a little bit. We wrote about a smorgasbord of different things, Jeremy. But ultimately, at the end of the day, our highest content was when we wrote about history, and that was really right in my alley, because that's what I went to college for, and that's what I studied, and ultimately that's what won out, because we have so many people moving, flocking here from different parts of the country, and I try to put myself in their shoes. Is if I was moving to a different part of the country, I would want to learn as much as I can about that history and that culture of the place where I'm going to. I believe that's why the Lantern has been so successful, is because not only do you get the ghost stories, not only do you get the local history, we also tell you about the small towns around the Carolinas. And I will say that we are somewhat divided. I've got the people that only comes to the Lantern to only read the ghost stories, and I believe they get aggravated when I start telling you about small towns. I can't write ghost stories 365 days of the year. I
Yeah.
could, but I can't. So you have these slowdown periods of February, March, April, May, heading into the summer months. I've got to switch it over at some point in time. So that's why you get a bunch of different niche content on the Lantern.
Yeah. It's always good to mix things up too.
Well,
Like you said, it's hard to would hard be hard to write a ghost story every day.
especially putting out 3 or 4 ghost stories per
Yeah.
day. And I've written about unsolved mysteries, cold cases in the past. It wasn't long ago I wrote about D.B. Cooper, Dan
Okay.
Cooper, when,
Yeah.
as you famous or as he is famously known for jumping out of the back of an airplane. I want to say it was in 1972 when he parachuted out.
Yeah.
When people, when you come to the Lantern or you read, and I'm gonna zoom in on the Haunted South Carolina book first. That book is, if you enjoy history, you enjoy haunts, it's all in that book. I even have a few stories in the book about some investigations. I'm not a paranormal investigator, but I felt like in 2026 it was time to start putting some of that information into some books. So that book is really a one-stop shop if you're looking for paranormal history and paranormal investigations.
I'm excited for that book to come out.
I'm actually working on my second book, and as a writer, I always try to make my second book better than my first, and I would think that's probably the way people that does these or do these films. It's always hard to beat the first film that comes out. That's why the
Yeah.
sequels are not, but I can promise you this second book, I'm taking my time on it. Books are like kids. You love all of them. And so you're gonna have to bring me back on after the second one to see how the second one sells, and I'll give you an honest assessment of, okay, because because I do that as an author. I'll pull it out. I'm very vocal, and I'll tell you what I did right, what I did wrong, and then I'll pick up and try to move my third book to try and make it better than my first two books.
That's great. So, what's your research process look like when you're digging into a haunted location?
Okay. All right. So I have a couple different avenues. I'm really glad that you brought this up. One, you have the internet, but when you write a book, you have to make sure that your bibliography page is up to date. Everything has to be researched in a book. And you'll find that on the Lantern too. Everything is researched. So number one is I start with the internet and I'll look at different areas. So I know where I am in a state. I know North Carolina, I know South Carolina well. And you want to encompass the entire state when you write. So the book can go on sale in Charleston, it can go on sale in Columbia and Greenville, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Then you start going into the historical societies. You start making phone calls or actually going or driving to those places. And I'm not gonna lie to you. A few of them will look at you sideways when you start asking them. And trust me, some of the best conversations I ever had is just getting someone's phone number and calling them out of the blue. And I'm like, look, I don't want you to think I'm crazy. I'm like, but I'm calling to inquire about any ghost stories because I try to write about the ghost stories that you're not going to see in other books.
Yeah.
So when I go into an area, typically when you start talking to the locals, what was that show? American Pickers. Everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah.
Okay, that is very true. I don't care which state you go into, but it's more so true down here in South Carolina, especially the directions that you get. Some of these areas, like I went in one place one day, I had absolutely no cell service, so I had to pull over at the local gas station, and uh, guy was looking at me. I said, "Hey," I said, "I need to ask you a question." I said, "I need to get to point B here. Can you tell me how to do it?" Yeah, you just go on up here and you'll see old man Bobby's shop. When you pass old man Bobby's shop, it's the next road up on the right. You just so everybody has a story to tell. But I have found getting into the communities, knocking on doors, walking in, and asking the people the stories, you uncover a lot. So it's a lot of research, it's a lot of driving, it's a lot of phone calls. Just because there's smoke doesn't mean you have fire. There's so many times that I've went into a situation where I'm like, okay, this could be. I can't tell you how many chapters was excluded from my first book, Jeremy, because one, I didn't think it lived up to people's expectations. It certainly didn't live at my expectations,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a hot chapter. It wasn't straight fire. But then again, you may go in looking for one story, you come out with something far better. And that happened a lot in that first book. And I'm starting to see it again in the second book. Newspapers.com is really good, especially when you have to go back and research a lot of history. I have a newspapers.com site. You'll be shocked. You will be shocked at some of these headlines from 1929. And let me tell you, they're not very politically correct the world is today with some of these
Yeah.
headlines. If you got a second, I'll share a chapter from my first book. It's The Ghost Train of Highway 161. It's in York County, right outside of Rock Hill, South Carolina, near Charlotte. I actually found this ghost story somewhat by accident. I was having a conversation with someone and they were doing the research for me. I believe it was at the Historical Society up in York County. And she said, "Oh, John, I uncovered a story from the Herald newspaper, which is based in Rock Hill, South Carolina, that dates back to 1987 about hearing a ghost train." Okay. That's all I needed to know. Okay. My next question is, why are people hearing a ghost train? So I pulled it up on my newspapers.com and it has been written about twice. It was written about in 1987, actually had people, locals, telling the tale, and in 1994. Okay, that's cool, but why are you hearing a ghost train? I was able to research to find out that there's not far earshot from Highway 161 used to be the Fishing Creek Trestle. I want to say it was a 450-foot long trestle. In September 1903, a mail train was coming down. Back then, they used to haul mail and passengers together. And it was coming down. I want to say it was a number 15 mail train, but don't quote me. I don't have it in front of me. And it hit the trestle with such force that the entire train plunged down, killing 5 people in the melee.
Ooh.
See, that's the research that you get in my book. Anyone else would say, "Oh, there's a ghost train, this and that." I'm telling you why there's a ghost train. So that's a story that would have been forever lost. Folklore would have been forever lost if I hadn't written about it. But I want to know the why behind it. So that was one story of how much I had to research to find the backdrop of that story and to find a ghost story.
Okay. Now, you did talk about some of the stories that kind of didn't live up to the hype. How do you distinguish between ones that kind of made it into your book and ones that didn't?
When I say one's okay, so it may be one that I didn't have a lot of information on. So if I'm putting another ghost story that's been written about in another book, it's more than likely I have another spin on it or I have an eyewitness account of it. When I say it just didn't live up, my hype is, or my expectations, I should say,
Yeah.
is that you can go and get other ghost books, and you see a lot, probably a lot of them behind me here. You can get them, and you'll see the same story after another printed in all of them. It seems. I wonder. So when I say didn't live in my hype, maybe I didn't have enough information on it. Maybe the trail went cold.
Yeah.
It started hot, it went cold, and then I am ADHD, so someone could said, "Hey, look at there," and I would have went that way. But eh, some of those stories are actually going to resurface in the second book. They're great chapters.
Yeah.
You have to feel the overall flow of the book. Does it fit here? Does it vibe in this book with the other stories?
Yeah.
Or is it sticking out like a sore thumb kinda? And that's the way I look at it. When you write a book, the flow is very important, and not saying that they're not bad chapters, they just didn't live up to my hype in the first book, not meaning that the second book doesn't flow better for those chapters.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, we've talked a little about haunted South Carolina. Kind of how did this book come to life?
I started about 2 years ago, and I'm just one of these. I feel motivated for a while, and the motivation hit me, and I was like, I really like to write a book. It's doing something I've never done before, and that's what really piqued my interest. I've never written a book. I'm a historian. I'm not a writer, but I think I write okay. And one day I just started going through and I just started doing the chapters. I just outlined the book. I want to say it was on a Saturday or Sunday. I just outlined the book and I said, I'm just going to do a little bit at a time. Then it became like I became addicted to it. It was okay. eh, I've got to go back out this weekend. I'm gonna be up near Charlotte. I'm gonna go out here. I need to go talk to these people, and it really became an addiction of.
Wow.
And And when I started writing, when I started typing it, I should say not writing it, but when I started typing it, I would save it. Chapter 1, and I would name it. Chapter 2, and then I knew I had to go back to tweak it or outline it. There were other things. As I went online and I put in, because when you write a book to be picked up as a published author, you have to fill out, it seems like there's mounds of paperwork that you have to fill out
Yeah.
to see if they want to take a chance potentially picking you up as a published author. And I was all prepared to self-publish my first book, but it meant more for me to have my children to go into a bookstore like Barnes and Noble or Books a Million or one of these bookstores to see their father's name on the shelves. Luckily, I was picked up as an author and I still had some work to do. And then that's when the real work began, because that's when they send you the way they expect for the book to look, to
Yeah.
flow, the formatting of the book and all of that stuff. Before I knew it, Jeremy, the book was just about done. And then I said, "Yep, I'm gonna take some time off." It was turned in April of 2025. They just couldn't get it out then before the fall, so that's why it got pushed back this year. So I took about a year off, and I'm back again writing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now it looks like you're going to be part of the Haunted America series.
Yes. Yep. So that's Arcadia Publishing.
Yeah.
They're really big. They really support a lot of local authors. You'll see a lot of their books all across the United States. It could be, I know Heather Leah just released a book of, I want to say she lives up in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was called Lost Towns of North Carolina. I've got a lot of friends that are authors. Tally Johnson has written numerous books about South Carolina. Sherman Carmichael. So great, they do a really great service by local authors, but that doesn't mean that you can just turn a book in. You still got
Yeah.
to have, yeah, you got to have everything to go along with it for them to say, "Hey, look, you're worth to pick up."
Okay. So when you're writing the book, how did you kind of narrow down the locations that would make the cut in the book?
In my mind, I said, okay. So I started in the upstate of South Carolina and I started moving across the state. I was like, okay, I need to have a story in or two stories in Columbia, South Carolina. A lot of these ghost books, they're very heavy on Charleston. I try to stay away from that in my first book. You do have two stories in that book from Charleston. I try to go to some of these areas that you don't hear much about to like, for one is York County, that Rock Hill, South Carolina. There's not many ghost stories related to York County. And so that was one that took some time, a lot of phone calls to unearth those.
Yeah.
So it's having a good balance. So when I outline a book, especially in South Carolina, you're getting in my mind a little bit. I'll do upstate, I'll do Midlands, I'll do low country.
Okay.
Then, yep. Then I'll go in and say, okay, if it's going to be a 35,000 word book, I know a 35,000 word book, depending on how they print it, that's going to be about 145 to 160 pages. That's with your bibliography and all of that. I didn't want anyone to feel like I put more focus on one area versus the other. So that was the best way I could do it. And so I started in upstate because I was here in the upstate. And then I kind of moved off to the Midlands and down to the low country.
Okay. That
Yep.
makes sense. So, is there a story in the book that surprised even you during the research?
Yes. So one story that has been told a lot. Actually, yeah, there's a bunch of them. So I'll tell you one. So it's the ghost. I'll tell you two. It's the ghostly lovers of Fripp Island. And the reason why it surprised me so much because you'll never see a ghost story about Fripp Island anywhere. And if you're not familiar with Fripp, it's the island of deer. It's right outside of Beaufort, South Carolina. I had to be careful because in North Carolina there's a Beaufort and they're spelled the same as that way. So South Carolina it's Beaufort, North Carolina it's Beaufort. And one of my areas of focus is the golden age of piracy in the early 1700s. We hear the stories of Charleston, South Carolina, Charlestown, of Steve Bonnet and Teach, also known as Blackbeard, blockading the Charleston port. You hear the stories of piracy all the way up to the Outer Banks. You don't really hear much about piracy down in the Fripp Island area of South Carolina. And so that really shocked me that there was a ghost story tied to Blackbeard all the way down to Fripp Island, down below Beaufort.
Wow.
I'm not going to say the second story was much of a surprise, but I did write about the Lawson family that lost their life. It wasn't the Cooper River Bridge then; it was a different bridge name in 1946. It was a family of five in a 1946 green Oldsmobile. They were going back up to the Northeast. So when they originally put the Cooper River Bridge in Charleston, it saved so much time between travel from the Northeast down to Florida that you look at it today, it's almost like a foregone thought. But back then, if you didn't have that bridge in place, you basically had to bypass all the way around and go. It made it a lot longer travel.
Yeah.
And I believe his name was Elmer Lawson. He and his family were coming back. I'm going to say they were coming back from Florida. I may be wrong, maybe Georgia, somewhere along there. And they were going across I'm going to call it Cooper River Bridge because that's what we call it here in South Carolina. And the Lawson family was in the car, and a freighter hit the bridge that night. And I don't have it in front of me. I want to say it ripped apart a 240-foot section of that bridge.
Ooh.
And the Lawson family plunged over at night into, I want to say it was 150 feet below, into the waters of the inlet. And they all died or succumbed to their injuries. That is a story that you can see in other ghost books. It's been written about in the past. When I pre-nobbed at the Citadel in 1995 and again in 1996, that was a story that was told among the Citadel cadets that if you go over to Mount Pleasant at night, be on the lookout for a green Oldsmobile that drives erratically. It will stop and go. Don't make eye contact and it'll automatically drive off the side of the bridge. What shocked me the most was I'm going to tell you the amount of research goes in this. Yeah, I could have written about this story like other people have. I wanted to bring a new outlook to it. Luckily, on social media, so I researched the family that was behind the Lawson family that night that went over the bridge. And unfortunately, the lady, I found her obituary. I want to say she passed away in 2011. I found her obituary online. And she was the mother that was in the car. And through the obituary, I found other family members of the Clapper family. And I started Facebook messaging a lot of these people because if you're on Facebook, if you're not friends with them, it goes to the spam mail,
Yeah.
spam message, and you're really at the kind of mercy of them checking it. And they may check it, they may never check it, maybe 2 years down the road. And I found a superb lady by the name of Michelle Clapper McGorry. She lives in Colorado, I believe, and it was her granddaughter. She's the granddaughter of the car that was behind them. And I sent the message, and a month goes by, and I was in Spartanburg, and I want to say it was in December 2024. My phone just dings at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she said, "John, I'm so sorry. I just saw this message. It went. I want to say it went to my spam message. What can I do for you?" And she and I got to talking. We set up a call, and I'm glad we did. Her grandfather was behind the wheel that night. Her father was 6 months old in the back seat in 1946.
Yep.
Her grandmother was in the passenger side. They were able to stop in time. The Lawson family was not. Hearing what that did to her grandfather, she said, "John," she said, "can you imagine?" Maybe not verbatim, this is what she said, but driving down the road and two small kids waving at you through the back of their car like this. And next thing they're smiling, and next thing you know, the car just goes over the side of the bridge. She said, "Jeremy," she said, "that's an image that my grandfather had to live with every day of his life that he could never get out of his head." But they heard these stories. It was passed down. If I hadn't got the in depth of the story to go along with this, it would have been lost forever. So
Yeah.
that shot me that was one of the ones that shot me the most was that I was able in 2024 at that time connect with someone out in Colorado thanks to social media to be able to save that story. So when you read that story, now you got the background of the family that's behind the car, and you don't read that, and you don't read that in any other books. The two children were waving from the back seat; they were smiling. I want to say they were age 4 and 7. That was in the back seat, and they went over. But there was a lot of surprises in this book. A
Yeah.
lot. Yeah,
Oh, I can imagine.
yeah.
Now, which location in the book do you personally believe is the most generally haunted and why?
I believe all of them are haunted. So a few weeks ago, I was actually out and I encountered a gentleman over in Williamston. I know the listeners don't know where it is. It's a small area up in upstate South Carolina. And I was speaking with him, and I wrote about the lady in white of the Chicola Hotel in my first book. And he looks at me, he says, "Yeah, I was the one that did the renovation project on that hotel. It was a $12.5 million renovation project." He said, "John, I'm gonna tell you something. If I had known this, Jeremy, I would have included his testimony in the book too, but it was
Yeah.
already turned in at this point in time." He was the contractor, he owned that building. And he said, "John, I couldn't get people in there to work." He said, "My subs left, they left tools behind." He said, "I don't believe in ghosts." He said, "But I know what I saw." So the Chicola Hotel, they turned it into something else now. I'm trying to fast forward to go through some of the stories. I will tell you I want to say it's chapter 4 is about the Erie ghost, the Erie train tracks in Chester County. I know that place is haunted. I've actually experienced the lights that just illuminate the sky at night.
Wow.
I'm just trying to go through a lot of the stories that was written about, because you got to remember there's 43 chapters in that first book.
That's a lot of chapters, a lot of
Yeah,
stories.
43. The one, the Hellas Man of Woodland Cemetery at Clemson University, that's one that you're never going to read in another book. That's actually linked to a real life. Archie Stein was the guy's name back to 1929. So if you're going to ask me which one is the most haunted, I'm gonna say all of them are, but there's not one that stands out to me that says, "Hey, stay away from this place," for whatever reason.
Yeah. Now, South Carolina has such a layered history between the Revolution, Civil
Hmm.
War, Gullah culture. How does that history shape the hauntings?
So you brought up the Gullah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever been to the coastal areas of the Carolinas?
Unfortunately, it's on my list. I really want to go to the Carolinas. I haven't been there yet.
Okay.
But
We had the Boo Hag. That is tied to Gullah, or the Gullah.
yeah.
I talked to one lady one night that she does a lot of stuff on ETV. And then as soon as I brought up Boo Hag, she is from the Gullah community culture. She said, "Oh no, John, now we don't talk about old Boo Hag now." A lot of the older homes or homes in that area, they have their porches painted a haint blue to keep the spirits away. So we have a huge melting pot in South Carolina, because the coastal areas you do have Gullah. One of my favorite authors of all time, Pat Conroy. If you're familiar, The Water is Wide, I highly recommend getting that book. Fantastic. He was a Citadel grad. He wrote The Lords of Discipline that they turned into a movie in 1983. So, Pat Conroy, you do have a lot of overlay. How the state is laid out is you have the Gullah, particularly in the Charleston, Beaufort, South Carolina area,
Yeah.
down on the islands. The lower part of the state, all the way up to Columbia, South Carolina, is really known for its Revolutionary War, but more so the Civil War. There's a lot of fighting. You have to remember, South Carolina, we didn't have any battles of the Civil War in the upstate of South Carolina. We're more Revolutionary War driven up here, up in the upstate. There's a lot of conspiracies out there why the upstate of South Carolina was spared from the Civil War. They have ranged all the way to Abraham Lincoln having relatives here in the upstate. You laugh about it, but I actually did go to the Hank Cemetery over in Entryville,
Oh,
and there seemed to be some legs to this story. I'll keep you all updated as I continue to research and uncover a lot of
yeah.
this stuff.
I'd like to know more if you find anything.
Oh, I've got a ton. I got a ton on it. You never know. My fourth book may be creating Lincoln. Hint,
Oh.
hint. That is actually that's actually an interesting story, and but you don't really you do have some overlaps in the state, but it's that's kind of how we're kind of spaced out. Revolutionary War more to upstate, more Civil War kind of Midlands. That's what we call it, Midlands of the state, all the
Yeah.
way down to Charleston. Of course, Charleston is a hotbed. Seems like every building is haunted by some spirits in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you approach these stories as a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between?
I write everything. I'm non-biased the way I write and report. Dr. Stan asked us in 2004, he stood up in front of the class and he said, "Can anyone guess my political affiliation?" The entire class went all around and it ranged everywhere from Republican to Democrat to Libertarian to this, that, and then he smiled and said, "I did my job." That's the way I approach my writing. I'm non biased. So I don't leverage where I don't say where I stand at. I write it the way it should be, straight down the middle. And I wish that's the way news outlets would write in this day and time.
Yeah.
Just give us the news, unbiased, because if I'm a believer or if I'm not a believer, it doesn't matter. You're not going to see it in the book.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. And I don't, it's just like I'm not a paranormal investigator. I never claimed to be a paranormal investigator. I have a lot of great friends that does it, and kudos to them. But that's not what I want to be in life. My job is to preserve the folklore so our children, grandchildren, and so on and so forth can read about all these stories one day when I'm long gone. Yeah, and also too, when you start muddying the waters, I'm a believer, I'm a non-believer, and I hear that all the time when I'm just like when I talked that gentleman down in Williamston. He said, "I don't believe in ghosts." That you already telling me where you stand. So when people read these chapters, whatever you take away from these chapters is very every chapter is I tell you where the places are in South Carolina. So if you're somewhat familiar with the state or how it's broken out, you know where these places are. I tell you a lot of history in this book, and then I'll go into the ghost stories of the book.
Okay. It sounds like a great approach. Now, what's the most unsettling experience you've had while researching a location?
The most unsettling was John D. Long Lake. If people are familiar with Susan Smith in 1994, she drowned her two kids in John D. Long Lake. It made national news.
Yeah, I remember that.
A lot of people are shocked to realize that in 1996, more people lost their lives on that lake when their vehicle rolled into the lake. I want to say it was the Phillips family, and I want to say 7 or 8 people died. I may be wrong with
Mm.
that, maybe 5 or 6, but it was 5+ people died when the brakes malfunction or something. I don't want to speak to that, but somehow or
Yeah.
another, the vehicle they were in as they were out paying their respects to the Smith kids, the vehicle rolled into the lake and killed a bunch of people. I
Mm.
went there. I went there in 2024. I believe I was going to include this in the book, and I'm a father. I have two beautiful kids, age 14 and 12, soon to be 15 and 12. And 1994, that was very much a part of my childhood because I was 15, 16 years old at the time. And where this happened was only about 20 miles from my house, straight down Highway 9.
Oh,
My parents lives off of Highway 9 in Chester County. This happened off of it's not Highway 9, but it's the road that cuts up going towards Union. So it's only about 20 miles.
yeah.
So it was all over local news. We didn't have internet back then. And when I went there that day, it's not in the book, but when I went there for about 2 hours after that, I started sobbing. I couldn't stop. I felt moments of rage. It was like something that came over my body that I can't describe.
Wow.
And I was like, I'll never go back to this place again. I'll never go back. It wasn't unsettling as much as it hit me after I left. And it wasn't that John, you were just wrapped up because you saw the memorial. No, I was raised with what she did to those two beautiful kids. Okay, that's 1994. This is 30 years later. I know the story well. Something just came over me. The most unsettling was when I lived in North Carolina and I came home late one night from Fayetteville and I was upstairs sleeping. It was an older home. It was a 3-story home. It had a full basement to it. And if you know anything about the South, it's very rare for a home to have a full size basement in the South. That tells you the age of the home. And I would hear things upstairs it would be the second floor. So you got the ground level, you walk into the second floor, but it's a 3-story basement. And I recently had moved my bedroom upstairs because I painted. There's a one night I came in, it was in the fall of the year. I said, you know what, I'm gonna sleep up here tonight. So I went in and threw my clothes off, turned an episode of The Walking Dead on, and I laid in the bed. And sometime in the early morning hours, I'm not gonna BS you that it was 2:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. I just know it was sometime in the early morning hours. I woke and there was a lady walking down the hallway. And when she walked down the hallway, I was frozen. I couldn't move. And she walked to the edge of the hallway. I can't tell you what she looks like. I can just tell you the outline of her.
Yeah.
And she reached inside the door, Jeremy, with her hand, and her hand was like it just moved right over the light switch, but you could see the light switch through her hand, like she was trying to turn the light switch off. And then she turned around and walked back down the hallway and disappeared into thin air. And
Wow.
yeah, that happened on February 17th, 2018, and the lantern was started on February 18th, 2000.
Coincidence?
I don't know. And then I did go out. I do go out sometimes if I'm out to a place and somebody's doing an investigation, I might go out and stop in 20 or 30 minutes, say hello to somebody. And another unsettling story was Crybaby Bridge over in Anderson. I know every county has a Crybaby Bridge. Research this Crybaby Bridge off Log Shoals Road. This is the real deal. They sent it to Charleston to have it worked on at one time, and Charleston sent it back and wouldn't work on it. So that tells you how bad it was.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'll never forget when I went out, somebody told me, said, listen to this. And they brought it up to me, and I was listening. It said, he's here. And I was like, he's here. I was like, okay, it's time for me to leave. But I have been to some scary places. I have seen a lot of things, but that's just a few of the times. Yeah.
so South Carolina isn't always the first state people think of when it comes to haunted history. Why do you think it deserves more attention?
You have to remember that South Carolina was it 1788
Yeah,
that we were founded? Yeah,
yeah,
we
it
were
was
one of we were
early.
one of the original. Yeah. You do realize we had witch trials in South Carolina just like they did in Salem, right?
Yeah,
Okay. People thinks of when they think of haunted location, and I believe, Jeremy, that marketing and the media has served these places well. I'm not saying New Orleans isn't haunted. I'm not saying any of these areas are not haunted. I just think that throughout the years that there's other areas that are bigger that has gotten a lot more love than what South Carolina has. I mean,
yeah,
Savannah is one place, Charleston, South Carolina. I put Charleston just as haunted as Savannah is. So I'm not saying that South Carolina hasn't got is not one of the first places people think of. They clearly think of Charleston, South Carolina when they think of haunted. That's got to be in the
yeah.
top 5 of haunted locations for people. But some of these other areas throughout the state, just like Abbeville, South Carolina, you may not even heard of Abbeville, but in my opinion, it's the second most haunted place in the state of South Carolina because it was the birth and the deathbed of the Confederacy. That's where the Civil War started and ended at, was in Abbeville, South Carolina. That's where Jefferson Davis and everyone else, after they fled Richmond, they went back to Abbeville, and that's where the secession started. I would say that the Northeast and the Southeast, particularly Charleston, Savannah, the Outer Banks is extremely haunted. Should be first of someone's mind when they think about haunted places.
Yeah,
And St. Augustine is, of course, down in Florida.
yeah. That's one place on my bucket list. Actually, all those that you mentioned. I haven't been too far in the South. I'm actually heading to New Orleans this coming week when this
New,
comes out. So
New Orleans is wonderful. I think I shared with you, I went during COVID back in 2020, and that is a very interesting city. If you get a chance, check out the St. Louis Cemetery. St. Louis 1, 2 is where, what's her name? I can't think of her name right now. The do
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wrote about her 2 or 3 months ago, so it'll come to my mind as soon as we get off. I love New Orleans. It's wonderful, but from a haunted standpoint, I would put Charleston, South Carolina up against New Orleans any day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but also too, the flip side of it is you had the ships that were coming in from Haiti into New Orleans as well. So that was
Yeah, there's a bunch of different, what do they call it? Genres in New Orleans that I think kind of add to that. There's the regular haunted, but then there's also the voodoo. There's the vampire kind of lore there. A lot of things mixing.
you do have a lot of things there, and I will tell you, when I went, as soon as I crossed the bridge, and I was getting in, and I came into New Orleans, I could feel that energy.
Yeah, I
Not,
want to see if I can feel the energy when I go. I'm flying in, but
I decided to drive. It was about a 9-hour trip for me, but I want to go through Gold Shores. I want to go through Biloxi, Mississippi. I want to see it all,
yeah,
kind of take it in. But that I will say that is the only place I ever been where you can actually feel. To me, I could feel the energy coming off that
I
place.
I've heard that same feeling you get in Gettysburg and Salem as well. I've never been to either place yet, but I've
You,
heard you get that same feeling.
you don't live far from Gettysburg, do you?
Salem's closer than Gettysburg.
Man, I used to go through Gettysburg all the time. Going up on the other side of Carlisle, Pennsylvania, because I used to crisscross all across Pennsylvania up through New York.
Yeah,
But I had so many great times there. But I haven't been. The only place I haven't been to, or one of the only places I haven't been to, is Salem.
I'm hoping to make it there in the next few years. That and Gettysburg are both hoping.
Y- You will, because in Gettysburg, I want to say there was 50,000 people killed during the Civil
Yeah,
War. Was it? You may fact check this. Was it July 1st and July 3rd of 1863? Is that when that battle happened?
I believe so. It was over. Yeah.
Hold on one second. Do I still have you?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I'm just gonna fact check this, because if I don't, Gettysburg, July 1st through the 3rd of 1863.
Yeah, I thought you were correct.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. You have to go to Gettysburg. Super cool experience. There's a lot of places across Pennsylvania, as you're fully aware, that's haunted, but the entire Appalachia area, so many stories. So once I get finished with my second book, it's gonna be another South Carolina ghost story book. Then I'm moving on to Haunted Appalachia. It's gonna be my
Oh,
third book. And that way I can go all the way up into New York. I can go all the way back down through Ohio, different areas. And I'm really looking forward to that book. And who knows, at some point in time, I say it may be my fourth book, it may be my 18th book, but Creating Lincoln is one that I need to start researching, because that's going to take a lot of time to
yeah,
write.
yeah. Oh, it sounds like it'll be a good book too.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, it's good. It's going to be a really good book because so much research go into it. And I'm really excited. Anytime I could bring history back now, I've got to also be cognizant of the naysayers too, because we live in a culture now where people likes to believe everything that they're taught in school, that this is the way history was and it was this way. And so you do get some pushback when you try to roll some of this back of
yeah,
saying, okay, that's not the way it really was. I don't care if Mrs. Smith told you this in eighth grade or the textbooks, but that's not the way. When I write about it, there's going to be a lot of research attached to it,
behind it. Yeah, yeah.
behind it. Yeah.
So now, is there a particular region in South Carolina that seems to have kind of the heavier presence than others? I know maybe Charleston, but outside of
Charleston, South Carolina is, of course, number one. Abbeville, South Carolina, which is right outside of Greenwood near the Georgia state line, is extremely active. Cherokee County, North Carolina, is probably the third most haunted, in my opinion. Now, everyone's opinion is different. In my opinion, it's the third most haunted county in the state. That's right off of 85 here in the upstate. And ironically, they also have ties to two serial killers. They have the Gaffney Strangler that wreaked havoc on that area in, I want to say it was 1966 and 1967. And then you have Patrick Tracy Burris, who wasn't released long out of prison. And he went through in 2009 and he killed a bunch of people in Gaffney. So, yeah, Cherokee County. So, I would really say those three areas. Areas like Myrtle Beach, not so much. Myrtle Beach, that area was really only founded in 1900.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's
So
not
it
a lot
was.
of, yeah, there's a lot of history tied. Like King, if you ever been to Myrtle Beach, a lot of people here's King's Highway. That's where all the shops are.
Yeah.
There's actually a story why it's called King's Highway, because it used to be a main thoroughfare for travelers through the area. People would get, it was a treacherous road to travel.
Yeah.
Today, that's 300 years ago. So when they see King's Highway today, they're like, oh, it's a nice area, this and that. No, it wasn't always that way. So I call Horry County a new area, especially the Myrtle Beach area, because it wasn't until Burroughs and Chapin, I want to say it was maybe Mr. Burroughs or Chapin, that started the Pavilion, the real estate company in our Myrtle Beach. I want to say it was
Yeah.
like 1900, 1910, or might be in 1901. They actually went out there and they actually had these grandiose plans of building Myrtle Beach up. Really, Columbia, South Carolina, a lot of Civil War fighting. Abbeville, South Carolina, Cherokee County, and of course Charleston is some more your
Yeah.
hotbeds.
Okay. Now, what do you think it is about the South that produces such rich ghost stories and lore compared to other parts of the country?
It's the war. It's the war. It's the disease. When you lived in the 1700s or 1800s, a lot of the people along the coastlines would come up into parts of North Carolina, like Flat Rock, North Carolina, up into the higher elevation to escape the summer heat, malaria, different diseases. So you have that. You have the Civil War. It was fought all across the southeastern landscape. So you have that. You have the Revolutionary War. So you have a lot of battles, and then you also have the golden age of piracy as well, all the
Yeah.
way. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that are tied to the South that still lingers
Yeah.
around. Yeah.
Very true. Yeah.
I'm a big proponent to having legend of lore markers placed across the state to preserve our area or areas from these developers. And all these people moving in from these different areas, Jeremy, that they come down here because they don't want to shovel snow for 7 months of the year. And they're like, oh, it's cheap taxes here. Be careful when you come here, because that land that your home is attached to, there's probably a good chance that something happened on that land at some point in time. So don't freak out 10 years down the road just because you bought a new home that the lights don't start turning on and off. Yes, it could be attached. A haunting can be attached to the land as well. And
Yes.
that's what raises a lot of flags in my head, like Summerville, South Carolina, right outside of Charleston. They're building these huge communities, luring these people in at $400,000 or $500,000 for a home, but they don't know what's attached to that land that they're moving
Yeah.
into.
Yeah. They could get a surprise.
It won't be the first time.
I know you've talked about what's coming next, but I just wanted to let you plug whatever you'd like,
Yeah.
coming books, anywhere that people can find you, etc.
I do want to thank you again for taking the time out, having me on. Huge fan. So my book is coming out August 18th. It's going to be released by Arcadia Publishing. It's going to be called Haunted South Carolina. You can actually pre-order now. You can go through Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Target, Books a Million, all these different places to pre-order. It will ship out on August 18th, and I don't know when you'll have it, but it'll be a few days after that. You can find me on the Lantern on social media. I'm trying to I'm trying to do less on social media. Last time I checked, we have almost 72,000 followers. So I'm looking to transition off of that landscape. I'm doing more podcasts. We're currently working on my second book. So I really want to totally get off the line or offline. Now, will that happen? Probably not, but I would like to. And I just concentrating writing more books. You can find me on other channels as well. Facebook is my largest channel I have, and of course, me and I believe Patrick Welsh is going to have a podcast coming out of the Savannah Paranormal Society that's going to be starting real soon. So you can find us on our own podcast where we really start diving into a lot of these stories around Savannah and Charleston and different parts of the Southeast.
Oh, very nice. And I'll make
Yeah,
sure to put a link to some of your socials and to maybe like the Amazon link in the
absolutely.
description below. So if anyone wants to pre-order your book, they can do so, or if they want to connect with you.
Yeah. And like I said, August 18th. So I hope it's one of the best selling ghost books of all time. I'm optimistic. I've got my fingers crossed. So that way, if it sells well, maybe they'll invite me back so they'll release this second book. And this second book is going to be a great book as well.
I look forward to it. I thank you for coming on here tonight. It was great kind of diving into some of the lore and hauntings of South Carolina and learning more about what you're up to. And don't forget to check out John's book, Haunted South Carolina, drops August 18th. And like I said, I'll put the links in the description below if you want to grab a copy. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and just also hit that notification button so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow the Common Historian or Jeremy Broughton, the Common Historian, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I also recently started a Threads, so you can check me out there as well. Keep digging into the darkness, and we'll see you next time.